Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is the first time today's guest will join us, but I did warn him in advance that I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. I have to
Okay.
admit that can make trips a bit more interesting. This is a trigger warning for those who are new to the webcast. They should be aware this is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged or by our satire. Today is July 16, 2019, and it is broadcast number 152. This week we are joined by Dr. Lyle Story, professor at Regent University, and we'll be talking about his online program, It's Greek to Me. As always, my name is Don Vino. Well, some people call
As
me.
always, are you always Don Vino, or is
I always am, but some people have confused me for other characters and
Benoit.
they call me. Yeah. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And with that, here is Ron.
greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, so their shadow, and we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this broadcast include World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet, and the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience, the Bible Buffet. And if you enjoy this webcast, or if it really annoys you and you would like to inflict it on other people, to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. So that's our shtick, Dr. Story. What do you think of it?
I think it's pretty cool.
Well, Dr. Story, I am so glad you were managed to work out being on with us. And it's a little bit different kind of program. So we usually deal with, cults, cult doctrine, false teachers in the church, and that sort of thing. But I have recently started going through your program. It's the Greek to Me, which Ron has some online
I'm scrambling here.
scrambling so you can show us what the look like.
Yeah, here's the, and we'll probably show this occasionally, intermittently throughout the program, so people know what we're talking about.
Right.
The book is available on Amazon, or you can go to greektome.biz in the lower part of the screen. If you go there, were you telling me, Don, that you could enter?
Yeah, if you go to greektome.biz and sign up there. In fact, they're still running a discount if you use our little code Greek15.
Greek15. Okay.
Greek15. And I don't remember exactly what the course is, but I think after discount you get to like $95 or $99. And they send you the workbook, which has in it characters that Dr. Story has developed to kind of help you remember different aspects of vocabulary. It has vocabulary along the way and how it all works together. In addition to that, I downloaded an app to my phone which has flashcards.
Right.
So I really like the program. It's like 2 semesters of Greek, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And yes, let me say this, that we don't think we're going to be doing anything more with Amazon, but people will simply order it from our website because it's a part of the program itself.
Okay.
Right.
So to let people know, go ahead.
And it also includes over 105 teaching videos, including any number of word studies to inspire and motivate and transform. And there's some blog postings there. There are some online automated quizzes so everybody can check their progress as they're working their way through. So it's a very comprehensive online program for the 21st century learner.
So people should know this book we're showing them is a workbook that's designed to go with a program that is done online.
Yeah, the textbook is the workbook. They're one and the same. There's the vocabulary app either on iPhone or Android with mnemonic devices to help learn vocabulary words. And the textbook itself has any number, several hundred pictures to help students learn grammar and endings. Sometimes they've been called, Greek's been called the language of the never-ending endings.
Yes, it is. You got
So
yeah.
That is true.
Just the omega verbs alone is like 79 paradigms, isn't there? And each one has 6 forms. So,
but this helps people with the all-important how of learning. That is the key.
Yeah.
Traditional rote grammars go along the route of just rote memorization, which is painful, boring, and ineffective, both for initial learning as well as long-term retention. I believe that God has given us the ability to imagine and think creatively, and that's part of what it means to be made in the image of God. So why don't we use our imagination and even cartoons to help forge a link between something unknown and the known, if that makes sense to you?
Oh, yeah. And just in case, people, need some reassurance about the high cultural level that you're bringing to this. I just thought I'd talk about the title, which I don't know if people realize. This comes out of Shakespeare, the play Julius Caesar. Cassius says, "Did Cicero say anything?" And Casca says, "Aye, he spoke Greek." And Cassius says, "To what effect?" And Casca answers somewhat sheepishly, "Nay, and I tell you, I'll ne'er look you in the face again. But those that understood him smiled at one another and shook their heads. But for mine own part, it was Greek to me." So if you say the phrase "it's Greek to me," or if you just say the title of this book, you are actually quoting Shakespeare. You might not have known that.
Yeah.
There's the Greek potential. I'm trying to get my mouse to cooperate here. It's not.
I just saw some dolphins.
Yeah, that's the ending of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. No, it's not. It's just a picture.
Every time I see it, I think of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the dolphins are going, "So long and thanks for the fish."
Sometimes when I'm displaying my mouse, I lose control of my cursor, and I keep on trying to click on the stop button to stop presenting, and it just refuses. So I just hit escape. The picture goes away. You see my desktop.
If I was your cursor, I would refuse as well. So how do you like that?
All right.
Well, anyways, here we are.
Would you like to know how this whole program originated?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Back in the late 70s or early 70s, I was a student at Fuller Seminary in the Master of Divinity program. I had never myself thought about pursuing ever teaching Greek. My desire as I was in seminary was this: if I'm going to spend this amount of time, money, and effort, I've got to make this really work for me. And so I made a personal commitment to start working both with Greek and Hebrew at working the biblical text into my devotional life. And I started off with just a few verses here and there, would make some comments and observations, and particularly a point of application or a prayer concern. The way I was taught Greek at Fuller was just abominable. It was just terrible. And so I was asked during my fourth year of seminary to help some students that were failing. And so it was out of that experience, and I was asked to teach at a school newly developed that grew out of the Jesus movement in California. And I was saying to myself, I've got to teach biblical Greek in a different way. And so I started working with memory books and memory systems and how people remember. And I discovered the whole mnemonic approach, and I also discovered that Greek orators who would sometimes speak for 2 to 3 hours, word for word, verbatim of something they had written out, they used memory pictures to help them learn their speech. So initially, with a class out there in California, I think this is very providential. I was near a colleague's office that was just on staff. And I said, Ed, you wouldn't happen to be an artist, would you? And would you be able to draw a picture of an oasis with an omelet that was oozing out of the pan?
Really?
Really? And he said, sure, I can do this. So he drew a picture. And then I took just this one picture to my class, and it was part of an overhead projector that we were using at the time. And the students found that this one picture of an oasis that was with an omelet that was oozing out of a pan helped them learn the 6 endings of the verb that they encounter in chapter 1, the present active indicative of the verb.
O-S-A,
Omen, eta, usi.
Okay, I'm not connecting.
So,
go ahead.
O-A-S-A is like the word oasis.
Okay.
Right?
O-A-S-A, except oasis. Yeah, okay.
It's close.
It's close.
And then the omelet is for the second person, or first and second person plural for amen, eta.
Oh, I ate it.
Omelet.
Omelet. I ate an omelet. Yeah.
And then this omelet that was oozing out of the pan.
All right.
The oozing is a substitute word for the ending usi.
Okay.
So over the course of probably 2 years, I developed pictures while I was out there in California. And then one summer, my father, who was a professor at Princeton Seminary, asked me to come and co-teach with him in the summer language program. And so I was dealing with much more sophisticated students at Princeton, but I was still bringing in these crazy cartoon images. And at first, they didn't know what to make of this guy from Southern California with long hair and sandals with cartoons. But within 10 minutes, they were able to see how this was really helping them. And so my father was won over as well. So he said, Lyle, why don't we write a grammar together? And so that's what we did. That summer, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I wrote from about 4:30 to 8 o'clock, and then would teach with him from about 8:30 to 12:30. And then the afternoon, we'd go over to an ice cream and coffee shop, and he'd look over what I had written, and we were able to make adjustments and corrections, suggestions, etc. And so basically, the grammar was written that one summer, but then we had to go back and do all the typesetting and new pictures, etc. But that was kind of the way it happened. And the very fact of me ending up with a PhD teaching at a graduate level happened by way of accident. This was something I never sought out to do. So there you have it. Luo, Luage, Lue, Luamen, Luita, Luusi.
Yeah, this is a project I'm working on PowerPoint. And I just wanted people to understand what you're saying. Those red Greek letters are those endings that you use. Oasis with an omelet oozing out of it. I thought, wow. I wish I had thought to transliterate the endings, but it's O-S-A, Omen, Ete, Usi. And you come up with a visualization that's people can kind of hang their hat on, or it puts handles on it for them.
Yeah,
and helps them memorize it. That's amazing. I think that's amazing.
So, I mean, that's the basic approach in terms of the grammar itself. And then for vocabulary words, for example, there's a Greek word, agero, that means I raise up. So we have a picture of that with a little Robin Hood character who is raising up an egg arrow.
I love it.
An arrow, and the tip of this arrow is an egg.
Okay.
So here you are raising up an egg arrow. And the memory system is built on two basic concepts: substitute words, and the other is that of linking things.
Now, do you think if I were to take your course, it would help me remember where I put my keys and my glasses and my wallet? Maybe, maybe.
Maybe sometimes we have selective Alzheimer's. I don't know.
Sometimes, where did I park my car? Usually, I
Yeah.
try to park it in the same place, but once in a while, I fool myself. But memory is a tough thing, and if you already are like me and you're forgetful, I mean, languages are a challenge.
Yeah. So it helps both with initial learning as well as long-term retention. That's the goal.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Now, there are some folks out there with kind of an academic snobbery, if you will, that
No, you're kidding.
think it's utterly ridiculous to be using cartoons and images of funny things to help them learn. It looks less than academic.
Would it be accurate to say you've encountered some of these people along the
Yes.
way? Yeah.
Yes.
As you've explained your system to them. Yeah.
Yeah. They just think it ought to be a very, very serious endeavor
Well,
and
yeah.
involve pain.
I have to make a confession, Lyle. Over the
Yeah.
years, Ron and I am my friend. He's passed away. Dr. Norm Geisler passed away 2 weeks ago, July 1. But he and I have been friends almost three decades, and we love each other. I am a street fighter. I'm not academically trained per se in a professional institution. He is sort of the consummate academic. He's written over 100 books on defending the faith, sort of two seminaries, and we loved each other. Partly because we both thought what we do is serious, but we don't take ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
All right.
I understand that.
I kind of see what you're doing here in that way. Is sometimes humor or funny characters, cartoon characters as you call them, can be really helpful to remember stuff. That's important.
That's the key. And that's what the whole Greek to me memory system is about. Helping people with initial learning as well as long-term retention, and in a light and a humorous way. I even encourage graduate students to pull out some colored pencils and color in some of the pictures in the textbook itself. Because in a passive way, in a relaxed mode, even their coloring in will help solidify the picture in their memory bank.
Right. Keeps you focused. Now, we're going to be taking some questions, and we have a question we had talked to you about earlier, because a variety of groups like to make an appeal to the Greek text in unusual ways. So it makes it sound like they know what they're talking about.
Yes.
Oftentimes, when you start looking at it, they don't.
Yes.
Is it necessary to learn Greek? Well, I have to comment on that. My friend Dr. Ron Rhodes has said our tools today for Bible study are so good that you don't necessarily have to read Greek because we have really great translations. We have really good concordances. We have a lot of great first-class tools. He said, but it's like watching a baseball game, if you like baseball. You can watch it on a black and white television, and you have everything you need to understand the game, what's going on, and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But if you watch it on a color television, you get the depth and the texture and those kinds of things that you don't get from black. He said that's like reading it in English versus reading in the original languages.
Right.
Well, you get the texture, feel, and the flow for things better
Certainly.
in the Greek than you do in English.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, when you go from one language to another, there's no such thing as a one-to-one transfer of meaning.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. From one language to another language with one word, there's just not a one-to-one translation. And you get into a Greek lexicon and you see the various ways that a particular term can be used. And I've always been guided by the principle of context and my statement that words are known by the company that they keep.
Yeah, the context, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, context, context, context. For instance, the Greek word nomos, that means law, in Romans 7 can be used in three radically different ways.
Mm.
And you have to pay attention to how that word law is used and translated in Romans 8. If you don't do that, then you end up in trouble. For instance, in Romans 7, Paul can say, on the one hand, that the law, nomos, is holy, righteous, and good. It expresses the will of God or the way of life for the people of God. On the other hand, the law in Romans 7 is something that makes people aware of sin, like coveting. It intensifies the sin of coveting, and then it kills a person.
Mm-hmm.
So it moves from being self-conscious to furthering or progressing, and then it leads to death.
Mm.
And then there's another way that Paul uses the term nomos, and it's often translated, and I think correctly, as a principle.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it is so critical for us working with biblical texts to see how words are used in their context.
So,
You raise a really important point here. I don't mean to. I mean, I do mean to cut you off, Ron. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
You just cut me off.
I cut you both off.
uh,
The reason I did that is this, because there are groups out there that I would call concordance cults.
Yes.
Now, by that I mean, for those who have never heard that before, is a group, let's say like Gwen Shamblin and Remnant Fellowship, for example. You'll hear her teaching, and what you'll find is she's citing concordance passage after concordance passage after concordance passage,
Yes.
and then trying to build a case for a doctrine that once you start looking at it in context,
yeah.
it doesn't really do. It doesn't
Right.
work that way. And it demonstrates that she doesn't understand things like words have a range of meaning depending on context. That's really important.
Well, just take the word mean. What do you mean by that? Well, I mean you're being mean. Well, when am I being mean? Well, when you don't follow the golden mean, you're being mean. That's what I mean. Okay, so
And do you have a means test to test that by?
Yeah, we have a mean, and the end doesn't justify the means. So yeah, right there, four different meanings of the word mean. There was an earthquake the other day. It registered something on the Richter scale, and after the people felt it, some of them went fishing, and when they caught the fish, they weighed it on a scale, and then they took out a knife and they scaled it, and then they decided that we're not far from the mountains. Let's go scale the mountains. Okay, there's 4 or 5 different meanings of the word scale. Each one of them, as you point out, words are known by the company they keep, and the company is the immediate context especially, but sometimes you have to go broader than that.
Yeah.
And so there, you just pointed out an excellent example where Paul talks about the nomos, the law, and then he goes to this law of sin that's in my members, a principle of sin in my members, and it's a different meaning. It's a different reference.
Yeah, let me give you another just English examples. The words "I'm sorry." Well, the words "I'm sorry" can be used in thousands of ways. A kid who skins his knee out in the driveway and is crying, and his mother comes out and she's trying to comfort him, and she says, "Son, I'm sorry." Well, that means something there.
Right.
She's not apologizing for anything. She's
Right.
expressing
Regret.
heartfelt concern.
Yeah.
I wish this didn't happen to you.
Yeah.
Or, and it means something altogether with an unfaithful husband who comes to recognize his infidelity and wants to make things right, confesses his sin to his wife, and says, "I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" That means something altogether different from the mother who says, "I'm sorry," to her son. And then one other example might be a teenager who has been put on restriction. Her parents have been talking to her about her rebelliousness, etc. And she slams the door and says, "Well, I'm sorry."
Mm-hmm.
Well, it means the utter opposite of a genuine apology.
And so there, the context is the situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can't do
Right.
a concordance on that
No.
and
Right.
say
Exactly.
what the mother is saying to her son applies to every time you find the word "I'm sorry."
So like if
Right.
so in other words, if somebody steals your car and you come to me and tell me somebody stole my car and I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," you're not going to call the police on me because you're not going to take that as a confession that I stole your car.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm
All right,
very
now we're gonna do a couple of quick things here. First, I'm going to tell you we have 3 questions waiting in the wings. I will warn you in advance, and then we're going to talk. Ron and I are going to do something really briefly on one of our favorite organizational translations. But the 3 questions come from one of our people who are currently with us, Abdurrahman. Abdurrahman, that's interesting. Who asked these 3 questions. What is the Greek word for worship? Number 1. Number 2, is it unique to Jesus and God? And number 3, if so, how do we explain Revelation 3:9? Apparently they've also looked at the LXX and the New Testament, and they're trying to sort those things out. So that is just a warning. We'll come back to that in a minute. In the meantime, the New World Translation, which has given Ron and I some humorous anecdotes at times, affects in some ways how they behave. Right,
Yeah.
Ron?
You really have to really become familiar with some of the very unusual renderings of the New World Translation to appreciate this new product that's out here. And it comes from our friends at World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas, whose time has gone, and they have some questions for you. Okay, all right. You know what the problem is. The problem is that men's hairstyles have gone downhill at your local Kingdom Hall. That's a problem. The reason is because of some misunderstandings arising from the New World Translation revision. And isn't that what the organization always says? It's because people misunderstand. And so, yes, once again, people misunderstand. The solution: grease your head with classic New World Translation hair oil. Once again, you can say, "With oil, you have greased my head." That's Psalm 23, verse 5b from the New World Translation. Not just any New World Translation, the classic New World Translation of 1984. Classic New World Translation hair oil based on the light of the original New World Translation. You know, the one the Apostle Paul used. Only at World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. Yeah, I came up with several memes. I especially like the ones that have to do with greasing. They don't like the word anointing, so they used grease.
Yes.
And I suddenly, I'm starting to
Which
see
it can be translated that way. It just doesn't make sense.
I wonder if John Travolta helped them with this translation. I don't
Or
know.
going to Jiffy Lube
Yeah.
to grease your car.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So the Greek word for worship. What is the Greek word for worship?
Proskuneo.
Yeah, that's the main one. I think there's a couple of minor ones, but that's the main one. Yeah.
Is it unique for Jesus and God? That's question 2.
Well, should I let the doctor answer that, or?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I mean, it's a general word that means to bow down, and in certain contexts, you see, there's the word's referent, what it's referring to in the context, and that often is the way the word is translated. What is, as Dr. Story said, the words are known by the company they keep. So in certain contexts, it's definitely a reference to worship, but other times it's a reference to simply bowing down. It's and people bow down in front of kings. It was an act not always of the worship of a deity. Sometimes it was just an act of respect and honor. And so this question is asking, how do we explain Revelation 3:9 in light of that, which of course uses the word proskuneo, and it says, "I will behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and proskuneo, or come and bow down at your feet, and make them know that I have loved you." So proskunesusin, that's the future
Right.
third person
Plural.
of proskuneo. And so so they're going to be bowing down, not because the Christians there are objects of worship, but they're objects of respect. Did I do an okay job?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it can be used simply to become prostrate before someone.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the Middle Eastern world, how respect is shown, as well as in the Oriental cultures. There are various ways that respect is showed. And again, context is critical. Let me give you an example. In the United States, for example, when I'm getting on an elevator and women are at the door of the elevator, most often I hold the door open for them to get on first, just as respect for them. And then I get on the elevator. When I was in Korea and I was teaching there, taught any number of times there, and I was teaching at a seminary there. Because of the fact that not only was I a pastor, but I was also a professor of New Testament in a seminary, it was like I was at the top of the food chain. So we were getting on an elevator, and there were any number of women students, and I stood by and waited for them to get on, and I motioned with my hands, "Go ahead and get on." I did this several times. And they refused to. And finally, I had to sort of give in to what for them is culturally appropriate. That since I, in their eyes, was so respected, that I had to be the one that got on the elevator first. So,
So the cultural context really can make a huge difference in how we understand how particular words are being used in their context. I have a similar kind of a story. I was in construction for 40 years. I was a construction manager, and we're doing a project and some demolition. And I just kind of was getting a little bored, so I went and got my tools, and I was taking some stuff apart. And we had a number of Polish workers there from Poland. And their foreman came over and said, "I need to ask you to put your tools down." I thought, why is that? He goes, "Well, because they think you're telling them they are not working hard enough. That's the culture they come from. The foreman doesn't work." And it never occurred to me to do that. So the same thing is true here as we come to this, how to use this word here. It doesn't always only apply to Jesus, God. It is a word in usage that had to do with giving proper, what's the word I want to use?
Respect.
Proper respect to others in particular situations.
Yeah. And again, that word is known by the company it keeps. That is its context.
Right. So now I saw someone asked another question, and that is, therefore, if we say that it can be translated simply bow down, uh, are translators being biased when the word is used with respect to Jesus? They translate it worship, as for instance, Hebrews chapter, I just located Hebrews 1:6, let all the angels of God worship him, and it's a reference to Christ. So is that introducing a theological bias into the translation? How do we answer that?
Well, again, we just need to point to the context. And in Hebrews 1, the writer goes to great pains to assert the utter superiority of Jesus over angels.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to humanity, the angels are servants of humans.
And it does seem to me that the author of Hebrews is not simply asserting Christ's superiority, but his deity.
Yeah, well, but his deity comes through in the first couple verses,
Mm-hmm.
the exact representation of his nature, etc.
Yeah.
But with the Old Testament quotes that are used in Hebrews 1,
right.
The writer is making a very strong case that the angels are so inferior to Christ. And it may well reflect that in the Lycus Valley, the same area of, as Galatia, that the worship of angels was something that people were doing, and that Paul had to condemn in the book of Colossians.
So, okay. And then, so you have if you look at the immediate context, and my verse was from Hebrews, it translates an Old Testament verse from Psalm 97,
Right.
verse 7, and it says the heavens declare his righteousness. Who's his? All. Yeah. And it's God's, it's the Lord's, it's Yahweh's, Jehovah, and all the peoples have seen his glory. That's Yahweh, that's Jehovah. And let all those be ashamed who serve graven images, who boast themselves of idols. Worship him, all you gods, it even says. Yeah. But the worship is obviously being directed at Jehovah in that verse. And then the author of Hebrews quotes that verse, applies it to Jesus.
Exactly.
It has to be worship instead of just bowing down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
and he does that frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's an important element then for me, who doesn't read Greek or Hebrew. I'm learning Greek, but I'm not obviously proficient at it. So what you're telling me is that the New Testament writer quoted from the Old Testament where it is worship, and therefore when we translate the Greek, we are translating based on the context immediate and from the quotation where he's quoting from.
Right.
All that plays into how we understand what was meant.
Let me give you another example of that, where Jesus is accused of declaring his deity. And then he appeals to Psalms where he says, "Are you not all gods?" Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting verse.
Well, if you look at the context from the book of Psalms where that comes from, it refers to human judges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And here's often how people think of human judges. I mean, they come in, everybody stands. You certainly cannot express contempt to the judge. You have to speak to him in honorable terms. And then the judge tells everybody to sit down, and he snaps the gavel. Well, to people that are in the courtroom, particularly prosecutors and defendants, the judge is like a god in that particular setting.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus saying, well, why are you having a problem with calling me God or me calling myself God? And yet the Old Testament says, are you not all God? So it's it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek dismissal of what they're saying.
And he's also in that same context distancing himself from the judges. He's saying, I'm different from them.
Yeah.
I'm the first the son who was sent into the world. I mean, those judges were the first time they when the first time they existed was the moment of their conception. Jesus was the
Well,
eternal Son of God.
Yes.
And in the psalm, it goes on to say, "You will die like men."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's in the Psalms, he's particularly focused that the judge needs to have a concern for the broken and marginalized in society,
Mm-hmm.
and not take bribes, and not take or not make use of power to uh, prejudice themselves
Yeah.
against the weak and the vulnerable. That's
Right.
the concern in the psalm. This is what a real judge should look like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, that's good. That is very good. All right, we're going to. Oh, you know what? We have another break here, by the way.
Yeah, I think we're. What
And
do you
then we
think?
want John 1:1 just for kicks and grins.
Just for whatever. Okay, well, we have, of course, we're always full of questions. If we're full of anything, it's that. Are you tired of hearing all about the difference between the milk of the word and the meat of the word? Are you wondering when your church is going to get around to serving the ice cream and cheesecake of the word? Does your pastor take the whole Bible thing way too seriously? Well, then you need to look into the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. Everything at the Bible Buffet is prepared with your comfort and enjoyment in view. Everything there is gluten-free, trans-fat-free, truth claim-free, and all of their dishes are piping hot and ready to serve. This week's regular Sunday specials include Aryan appetizers, Sibelian succotash, Galatian goulash, Gnostic nut salad, and Pelagian pie. And don't forget, the Bible Buffet is a fully accredited ministry of the Church of Smorgasbordianism. Yes, the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. So you're going to check that place out, right?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You men are really clever.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's important because when we're dealing with false teachers, they tend to pick and choose not only their doctrine, but how they want to translate certain passages because it benefits something they are trying to teach that is false. John 1:1 is a good example of that. I often, as you and I spoke before we started today, I often try to steer people away from going to John 1:1 with Jehovah's Witnesses, not because it is a good passage. It is a good passage, but because they train to argue with you on that passage. And so come back to it later. There's other stuff that we can do. But that being said, if you were talking with a Jehovah's Witness, how would you, and you read Greek, and as you shared, they oftentimes don't want to stick around once they learn that. How would you deal with John 1:1? Should it be translated, the word was a God, and why or why not?
All right. Let me go on to the screen share here and hope it's working. All right. Are we seeing the PowerPoint?
I'm seeing myself.
It might be. You want to say click on the top, or it might say present it to everyone or something.
All right. Let me try again.
You're almost there. You did the screen share, but then you might have to go to the top, and there'll be a little pop-up bar that says present to everyone.
I think we've got your desktop there, or what?
Yeah, we have all black now.
All right.
A couple of files, a link. Oh, there we go. All right.
All right. So the question about John 1:1 and how to translate it. Let me just draw some English examples of predicate nouns and adjectives. Look at the first example here. We are Greek students. Now, the subject is we. And so in Greek, that's put into the nominative case.
Yeah.
And then the second question, what is said or predicated about the subject that we're Greek students? Now, Greek students has to be in the nominative case because we is in the nominative case. The two match together. So Greek students is the predicate nominative that directly relates to the subject we. And then I put there another example. You are the faithful man. The subject is you. That's the nominative case. And then we can ask the question, what is said or predicated about the subject? It's that the faithful man. That's what's being said about you. And so
it's describing something about the man. You
it's
are
describing
faithful.
something about you.
Okay.
So we could almost say you equals the faithful man.
Right.
And because you is in the nominative case, the faithful man also has to be in the nominative case.
Now, to clarify for those watching, another name for the nominative case is the subject case.
Right.
And especially in English grammar, but they're kind of interchangeable. And in Greek, the nominative case takes a different form from the other cases, but we don't always see that, maybe even rarely see that in English. So
right.
You know what case it is in English by how it's functioning in the sentence. You know what case it is in Greek by how it's spelled.
And the ending.
The ending, particularly. Yeah.
I mean, you can have the subject in Greek occur at the end of a clause or even a sentence.
Right, yeah.
English follows word order, while Greek uses case to express how nouns are used in the subject. So the main thing here that we're getting at is that nominative case is the subject of a sentence. It's the subject case. Okay. So with the two examples, the two subjects are we and you in these two sentences. Then what is said about we is that we're Greek students. So we could almost say we equals Greek students. And then in the second examples, you equals the faithful man. All right.
In poetry, poets play with word order. If a poet had written the sentence "Greek students are we," wouldn't we still kind of know, just because we're so familiar with English, we'd still kind of know that we is the subject?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go on.
All right. So here's John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Now, are you able to see my arrow on the screen?
Yes. Well,
your cursor arrow. Now we just advanced a slide. Are you pointing to? You're trying to point to something?
Yeah. Let me try a pen here. All right. So the Word was God with God, or should I think better translated, the Word was in company with God, and the Word was God. Now, the main subject here is the Word.
Okay.
Then we have the verb was, which is a form of the verb to be. And then we have God. So in the last statement, what is the subject? The subject is the Word. What is said or predicated about the subject? It's that the Word equals God. And that is then put into the nominative case or the subject case. So over off to the right, you have the Greek for that line. And it reads there, kai theos ein ha logos.
Yeah.
Now, theos means God. Ein is the imperfect form of the verb to be, literally means he, she, or it was. The translation's down below here. And then you have halagos, which means the word. Now, when you're translating a Greek sentence, you always want to go with the main subject there, and that is noted by ha logos. Ha there is the definite article that means the, and it goes with logos, which is also nominative. So that it should be translated, the word was God. Now,
So, yeah.
this goes to a rule, and I want to say this is general. There's some instances where it doesn't hold true, but this was first discovered by Colwell. And here are the two rules here. In sentences which use the verb to be, a definite predicate nominative, that means we have a definite article that precedes the noun. So a definite predicate nominative has the article when it follows the verb. Secondly, in sentences which use the verb to be, again, a definite predicate nominative does not have the definite article when it precedes the verb. So if we can go back to the previous slide here, God here does not have an article, the word the, that occurs right before it. It's not hatheos. Well,
Right.
how does that noun occur in the sentence? Well, it precedes the verb to be right here. Halagos is your main subject, so it's not needed. The word was God.
So so basically, you're saying this follows a general pattern that we see in Greek. Both theos and logos are nominatives. The question is, how do you tell which one's the subject? And
You go with a definite article.
you go with the definite article, and that then makes theos not indefinite. It just makes it the predicate nominative.
Yes. All right. So here we are again. We have the application of the rule to John 1:1. So here's the predicate nominative God. It doesn't have the definite article the. Here's the verb to be, ain, he, she, or it was. And here is your main subject, the word. God precedes the verb to be. So going down to my bottom point here in the last line, the word God does not have the definite article since it occurs prior to the verb to be.
Okay.
So let me go to another example, and this is from John 1 as well, where we see two examples here. Off to the left, you are the Son of God. Now, here again, the subject is you, isn't it?
Yes.
And what is predicated about you, that you're the Son?
Right.
So the Son needs to be nominative because the you there is nominative.
Okay.
And secondly, the second affirmation is you are the King of Israel. And these words are spoken by Nathaniel. You are the King of Israel.
And yet,
So,
if we were to follow the Watchtower Society, that word basileus or basileus it should be a king of Israel.
but they don't translate it that way.
They don't, do they?
No. All right. So now off to the right, you have the Greek text. Here's the word you, Sue. Right? Everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Here you have the verb to be, you are, a, and then what is predicated about you? You are the Son. Now notice here with the ha, that word means the Son. Tutheu is of God. It has a different ending, which indicates possession. That's called the genitive case. Now notice the position of the subject right here.
Yeah.
It
Before the verb.
precedes the verb to be. You are. We got it?
Yeah.
Now look at the second affirmation. We have su again, that means you. Then we have basileus, that means king. And then you have the translation of the form of the verb to be, you are. You, King of Israel, you are, or literally, you are the King of Israel. Now notice here, the predicate nominative precedes the verb to be here.
Yeah.
And so here you translate it as you are the King of Israel. So down at the bottom here, I just spell out what I just said verbally.
Yeah. So it's not, I mean, even though the word for king does not have the article in Greek, it's translated by everybody, including the Watchtower Society, as the king, and with good reason, because it's following this general pattern that Caldwell talks about, where when it precedes the form of the verb to be, it is definite,
Right.
even though it doesn't take the article.
Yeah, even though it doesn't have the article, it's understood.
And you look at just the times that the word God, it occurs just in the first chapter of John.
Yeah.
And in the prologue, the first 18 verses, it actually occurs more times without the article than with the article.
Yeah, I agree.
And yet it's the New World Translation always has God with a capital G, except for one time.
Yeah, it's so the Jehovah's Witness, the New World Translation, it matches the translation, Son of God, you are the King of Israel, and that's critical. And here's some other examples from John 1:21, Matthew 11:14, and Ephesians 1:14.
Oh, those are great examples.
And again, it just shows the position of the predicate nominative with respect to the verb to be. So I don't want to go through all of the context here of each passage, but these are some passages that your interested listeners and viewers can look up for themselves. It follows the pattern that I just laid out.
Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that probably a typical everyday reader of Greek would have just known. It just comes instinctively because they're just so familiar with their native language. But we have to carefully observe, and we have scholars like Caldwell who've done this for us, and others have come since then, and they've pretty much confirmed that, yeah, this is a general pattern.
Yeah.
Now if you have time, we're right up near the end here, but if you have time, we have someone who was asking a question: why isn't the Tetragrammaton present in the Greek New Testament? Do you think the Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong for inserting the name in the English translation of the Greek New Testament? It's an interesting question.
Yeah. Let me say that the Tetragrammaton that we find in Exodus is preceded by the word "I will be" or "I will be with you." That's ehye. It's EHYEH. Now it is very curious. After Israel's suffering in bondage, God Yahweh saw their suffering. He was moved. He listened to their cries. And the question is, what is he going to do about it? The suffering of his people. So we have in Exodus 3:12, the ehye, I will be with you. And then Moses wants to know the name of God. What shall I tell the people of Israel when they say, what is the name of your God? And he says again, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. I will be with you, or I will be who I will be. I hate the translation, I am that I am.
Really?
Because that reflects the Greek static view of God as the self-subsistent deity. So why in the world in Exodus 3:12 is Ehyeh translated by as I will be with you? And then we have two more occurrences of Ehyeh in the following verses. I will be who I will be. And then in 14, you have the tetragrammaton YHWH that is linked up with Ehyeh. So from my standpoint, the translation Ehyeh, I will be or I will be with you, more specifically relates to the struggle of the people of God and their need to know that God is with them and he will do something for them on their behalf instead of a self-subsistent deity. Now, the Greek translation, the Septuagint, has the static language. I am that I am, or I am the being one.
Yeah.
But that is not what is there in Hebrew. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, now when I come to kind of to the follow-up question, should it be in the Greek New Testament? Typically, my response. Now, again, you're the Greek guys here. My response is no. In the Old Testament, where you're using a name, whether it's Lord, all capital Lord, we designate in the beginning. This is referring to the God of Scripture.
Yeah.
Or you put in Jehovah or Joseph Smith or whatever you want to use. If you say, this is what I'm going to use when I get to this Hebrew word, as long as you're consistent, we're going, okay, that's the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton doesn't occur in the Greek for a key reason. It isn't Greek.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but a couple things. Number one, I'll just stick to one thing. Isn't it true that the Watchtower Society claims that the original manuscripts of the New Testament, whenever the word Kyrios, Lord, occurs in an Old Testament an Old Testament reference.
It's a quote, right?
Quote, that what the original authors wrote was the Tetragrammaton, and that they even wrote it in Hebrew characters into.
Can I jump in here?
I haven't heard them make that claim.
The Masoretes who put in the vowel pointings.
Right.
I mean, the tetragrammaton was simply YHWH.
Right.
Yeah.
They put in vowel points to make the sacred name unpronounceable. So even in Jewish synagogues today, when they're reading publicly and they run across YHWH, they translate it as Adonai. That's what they say.
Right.
They don't say Yahweh, they say Adonai, because the sacred name is too sacred
holy
to pronounce.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, let me just make reference to Matthew's gospel, because you have this Ehyeh formula that occurs 3 times: at the beginning, at a midpoint, and at the end. I will be, or I will be with you. It is present with the language of Emmanuel. I will be with you. That's what the Emmanuel means, God with us. I will be with you. Okay?
Okay.
It occurs in Matthew 18 in the context of church discipline. where Jesus speaks, and there I will be in your midst. When you're praying and making decisions about what to do in terms of church discipline, I will be with you. And then it occurs in Matthew 28 in the Great Commission. I will be with you to the forever and ever, and unto the age to come. So you have that little formula, echia, that we find in Matthew 1, Matthew 18, and Matthew 28. I'm just wanting to draw attention to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as support of that, there are so many expressions throughout the Old Testament of God saying, I will be with you.
So in Matthew 28:20, it's ego methumon emi pasas. I am with you always.
Yeah.
And I never noticed that. So you might not have pasas, obviously. You just have the ego methumon emi.
But I with you.
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting. That is really interesting. And you're saying that you trace that particular expression to Exodus 3:14.
No, 3:12 and 13. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will be.
Okay, I thought I'm sorry.
So the name that is given to Moses, Echya, is then later in 14 paired up with YHWH, the Tetragrammaton.
Okay.
Okay, now we are over time. I want to do something, and I want to try to do this very quick. If I'm off base, of course, you guys will both catch me on it, but it's relative to the Watchtower again, and something that you brought up, Ron, that what they actually do is say, when there's a quote in the New Testament, if it's a quote from the Old Testament, and it is Yahweh, we will put Jehovah in there. I would suggest that they've left translation at that point and become commentators because it's not in the Greek.
Right.
That's number one. Number two,
Curious.
They use Kyrios, right? They are inconsistent, and we see that in 10:9 through 13.
Or Philippians 2.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just do 10:9 through 13 because it's really apparent there, where it says, "Confess with your mouth," Jesus says, Kyrios. Believe in your heart that God is raised from the dead, and so forth. When you get to verse 13, the word Kyrios occurs there, but they translated Jehovah.
Yeah.
Call in the name of Jehovah.
Yeah.
You can't really do that because the same person is a subject from verse 9 through verse 13. The apostle is applying this passage from the Old Testament to Jesus, and we can do that. We can show that pretty simply by talking about Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. Call in the name of Mr. Smith, you should be saved. For with the heart one believes on Mr. Smith for salvation and so forth. Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith. If you have two persons there, which is what they're trying to say, then what you're saying is something like this. Ron is reliable. Ron is someone you can trust. Ron is someone who can come through whenever you need something. So if you need something done very badly, call Lyle.
Okay.
Right?
Doesn't work.
I don't live in Florida.
Yeah. So, when I've gotten into similar conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses on this, their fallback seems to always be, but the reason he's sometimes called, or the reason they sometimes use terms of divinity and apply them to Jesus is because he's Jehovah's representative. And that's, for some reason, that satisfies them intellectually. I can't see it, but they use that.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered that, Don?
Yes. But, the average Jehovah's Witness, we will cover this again just briefly. They're not Bible students per se. They're clearly not educated in the languages. Very often you have Christians who can't read Greek arguing with Jehovah's Witnesses who can't read Greek. And Jehovah's Witnesses who don't really read the Bible, they read books about the Bible, the Watchtower or Aid to Bible Understanding or something like that. And they learn by rote memory, which is something we talked about earlier just regarding languages. And so it isn't as though they've thought these things through. So But it is time, guys. We are 10 minutes over, and we do that quite often.
I can keep talking.
Well, I don't know if you're willing to do this, but I've really had fun doing this. Maybe we can do this again in the future.
All right.
That'd be
Sounds
great.
good.
Okay. So, Ron, you want to tell them again about how to get to the program if they want to, and then
that would be greektome.biz.
Biz.
All right. Can I also say something? I had a book come out this last fall, published by Herder and Herder / Crossroads. It's called Joyous Encounters: Discovering the Happy Affections in Luke Acts, and expressing a real concern that God is a God of great joy who wills joy for the people of God. And Luke is particularly emphasizing, both in the gospel as well as the book of Acts, a lived theology of joy as people encounter some aspect of the divine. So I just wanted, and I'm using the Greek text there, but I put in the English translation for non-Greek readers.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to do something. Have your publisher send us a copy for Ron to read, and then we'll have you on to talk about the book and help get it promoted.
All right. Great.
And so that would be if they went to Amazon, looked up Dr. J or just J. Lyle Story, they would find that book, Joyous Encounters.
Right. Discovering the Happy Affections in Luke Acts.
Okay. So, all right. That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Go to greektome.biz, sign up, put in Greek 15. You'll get a discount, 15% discount.
All right.
And Ron, you want to walk us out of here?
All right, let's escort you guys out of the building. All right, so our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits. Our culinary services come from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Justin Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Ali Gurmus. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for Cult Based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, dehumanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our technical assistant comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance and wiretapping. Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are totally responsible for this content, although you will never prove that in a court of law. And we're so glad you enjoyed that, Dr. Story.
I really did. Laughing all the way through.
Some people just sit there and we don't know what they're thinking, but you let us know. Thank you.
Hold on a second. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else. And so hang on, guys.